Poker's legendary champions, next-generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of Tactical Tuesdays. You can see, if you're watching us on the YouTube channel, I have sun directly in my eyes right now. It's that time of day. I'm joined on Tactical Tuesday by my co-host, John. John, welcome back. Good to have you, as always.
How's it going? Got some, sorry. I guess I'll let you answer how you're doing first.
Yeah, it does. It's irrelevant. I don't need to answer. you know I'm doing okay. That's the that's the answer. You dive like straight into the video. You're just a man who wants to get to the point. No chit chat or small talk.
We didn't really have a theme for this Tactical Tuesday, but we just discovered that both of these hands are 3-bet pots where I'm in position. So that is officially the theme for this episode, even though the hands are not really related and the spots are not similar.
Yeah, this is themeless Tactical Tuesday. See, having no theme can just be a theme in and of itself.
Yeah.
So in this themeless Tactical Tuesday, John, why don't you just break down the first hand since you're just ready to get into it?
Yeah. Okay. So this hand starts with a reg and the cutoff opening to $20. I 3-bet ace of hearts, king of clubs, ace king offsuit to $70. Folds around back to the cutoff, who flats the $70. We're 100 big blinds effective. Not too much to talk about pre-flop.
Nothing.
Yep.
Nothing to say.
Yeah. Get the ace 4 deuce two-tone flop. I have the king of clubs and there's a club flush draw on board. The cutoff starts by checking, and I assume I start by betting flop for 1/3.
You do.
And the cutoff calls.
Not a lot going on right now.
Yeah. Actually, maybe we should note this for the listeners. Brad hasn't seen either of these hands yet. I'm pretty impressed. We're just going into these hands like totally cold. These hands might just suck. And Brad's just like, why are we talking about this hand? But yeah, Brad hasn't seen either of these hands yet. So he's actually genuinely surprised that there's been this little action up until the turn, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, most of the hands that I have opinions on or play happen in the moment. So why should Tactical Tuesday be any different here?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. This is where it gets exciting, though.
Cool. Is Villain going to donk the turn? I knew it.
And big, too.
So for the podcast listener, I don't know what the deal is. John is not actually trying to eat his microphone, but it's getting some feedback. He's getting too excited, and things are getting really, really loud. But now he's looking at his microphone, desperately trying to see what the issue is. Just don't get excited, man. You just, have fun playing poker. Don't get too excited. Even
this guy donk turned in a 3-bet pot for like almost pot.
That they did. And yeah, I don't really think there's anything we can do other than call.
Whoa. Okay. Okay. So that was going to be, okay. Well, I'll first start with my thoughts. I don't think donking this turn is that crazy. I'm not super shocked to see it on this 4-liner where I rarely have a 3, and I guess the cutoff has more threes than I do. I mean, he definitely has all his pocket 3s. I probably never have pocket 3s. Who knows if he flats his ace 3 suiteds, but there's one of that as well. If he does, or actually there's 2 ace 3 suiteds that he could be flatting pretty. So there are definitely some straights that he could have. The thing that like really sticks out to me though about this lead is the sizing. I would have expected a much smaller sizing on the turn, followed up by a big river bet. I was surprised to see pot on the turn and wasn't really sure how to begin interpreting this. Like, is there some reason I should think that this is more bluff heavy or more 3x heavy? I don't know.
I think like it's hard to be able to discern that. I would say that like the big bet here is setting up for a river jam, which I think would be the appropriate sizing that villains should use when they're out of position here. They just want to threaten stacks. So, like, I actually think that this big polarizing bet makes all the sense in the world and would be the sizing that I would expect.
Okay, so what I expected, well, I expect the stacks to go in on the river anyways, but like I guess like what I see most commonly and what I expected to see here would be like a small bet, like 1/3 pot and then 2x pot jam on the river. This big size feels like it almost makes my decision, like the hands that I want to continue with, that decision a little bit too straightforward and easy. Whereas when he goes like a third, I'm really gonna have to start thinking about calling with some real bluff catchers like kings.
Well,
queens and
it
jacks.
depends, right? Like it depends on the frequency in which you're c-betting this flop and the range in which you're c-betting this flop, right? Like basically, if the big bet makes it pretty straightforward, so like if they do have some sort of low equity hand, pocket sixes or whatever, then or 5-6, I guess maybe 5-6, which is
King
a
jack of spades.
turn pair of fives, king jack of spades, those type of hands, like you're going to fold out more than half of your flop c-betting range because you're going to be c-betting this board at a very high frequency. So like if we're just looking at like the fold equity generated by this big turn donk, I think it's going to like really do a number on your flop c-betting range. I mean, you mentioned that like, you seemed like you were surprised when I said that we just call the turn, which makes me believe that something else is going to happen on the turn other than calling. So like, I guess let's start there. Like if you're going to fold ace king on the turn, well, that makes the sizing pretty good, I think.
I don't fold
because
ace king on the turn.
Okay, so so you're gonna rip it.
That was what I was gonna ask. Was like because we had in the last Technical Tuesday, last week's Technical Tuesday, where I had the set of queens and the turn bot and the flush. We did talk about like just jamming the turn, and in a sort of similar situation where you're likely just calling to call every single river. Why not just deny equity or force them to put it in with a draw? Maybe they have like even like a really strong draw, like straight draw plus flush draw that they're, way more happy to put it in with than like just the flush draw. We don't know if they bluff the river. If the river comes like the 8 of hearts, like do they bluff the king jack of spades or queen 10 of clubs type hands on the river? Like we don't know that. So like jamming here. Well, I actually thought that, I'm actually surprised. I thought that you were gonna advocate for jamming turn.
Yeah, no chance. This hand doesn't improve, and villain's just very polarized here. And I also think that they have incentive to bet the river as well once we call the turn, because we do have a lot of single pair ace-x hands in our range that can fold on the river. That like,
What?
I just call the turn and probably I call the turn and then decide on river.
I mean, that's like one of the reasons I was going to say that I don't like this size on the turn, because once this donk size on the turn, because once I do call this bet, in my mind, I'm just like never folding any river. So like your bluffs, your success rate on your bluffs on the river is just going to be like really, really low, because these are the types of hands that I'm continuing with facing pot on the turn. And so like in my mind, it's like that, like, do you want your bluff success to be really low on the river? And maybe your turn donk success to be really high, or do you want like the flip flop where you bet small on the turn, have that get called a lot, and then realize a lot of fold equity on the river with the 2x pot shove?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in this spot we can just simplify to like they have a pretty polarized range here that's donking, and I don't necessarily know that they're doing it with hands that have a lot of equity, like a significant amount of equity. I'm not exactly sure, but I don't know. Interestingly, so little sneak peek into my brain. I don't even remember what we talked about 1 week ago on Tactical Tuesday. I don't remember the two hands that we broke down. For some reason, there's like a blank spot in my brain, so I don't know what I said. Can't remember the hands. It's been quite the hectic week, actually. The repository for podcast ran out, and Villager podcast ran out, so I've done many interviews this week, and Wolves launched. So if you could refresh my memory of last week, you turned a set. We advocated
No.
jamming the turn.
I flopped the set in a 4-bet plot in position. I called the button with pocket queens.
Uh-huh.
And the flop came queen high with 2 clubs. The turn completed the club flush draw, and the 4-better bet the flop and bet the turn. And you said that jamming river or jamming turn was what you think you would do and what I should do. A little bit of a different spot considering he's not like donking the turn, but
yeah, it is a 4-bet spot. I don't know stack sizes. Like they must have gone really small in the flop and then really small in the turn as well.
yes, correct.
Okay, so a 4-bet pot, and they went really small in the first 2 streets, and now we have a 3-bet pot where villain's donking pot on the turn. I don't know exactly how how similar these situations are. I don't know.
Jamming for the same reasons in my mind, in these 2 spots. But maybe
yeah, I mean, so the problem is like we have little visibility on this strategy that villain's using.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just don't know exactly what's going on here. So yeah, just calling, realizing the future data point of what action they take on the river, and then what the river is, and then kind of deciding from there. I don't know that it's the worst thing in the world to consider jamming versus or folding versus a jam on the river. Probably not going to be folding this hand. I think it's just too strong, too high up in our range. But yeah, this is just a wacky spot that's like really hard to navigate, really hard to have like some built-in heuristic to help guide us, because we don't really know what villain's doing here.
Yeah. I had no idea.
Yeah, which I think makes a lot of sense, because it's just a weird thing. They bet 228 and a 254 on ace deuce 4-5 4-liner with double flush draws available.
I just like to simplify my thought process. He has draws in 3x.
Draws 3x. I mean, a set's not like just
Sure. He could have a set.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Like ace 5 is not crazy. Anyway, you said 2-pair. So the river's a 6 of clubs. We have the king of clubs, which is pretty good, I think. Blocking villains, club flushes. What happens on the river, John?
He jams.
And now you're at the critical juncture.
One of the 2 flush draws completing on the river is probably our like spade and club rivers are probably the 2 rivers that I am least happy about. I think his bluff donk turn range is going to be spade hands or club hands. I don't know. It's nice that I do have the king of clubs here, so that definitely reduces a lot of the combos of club hands that are going to open the cutoff and call a 3-bet. I don't know. I wasn't really planning on folding a lot of rivers. Anyways, like if a spade came, I would just hope that he has the club draw. And if a club comes, I just hope he has a spade draw.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of what you said that like when they bet the turn big and you call, that it's likely the perception is that their fold equity is going to go down. It's hard to pull the trigger on the river here once you continue. And the front door flush completes. Oh boy. So,
okay,
I guess
can I ask a question before we get into like this exact hand? You mentioned that like you would call some hands on the turn, like call the donk on the turn, and then fold some hands on the river. What are some hands that you would do that with on this river? Like, are you talking about like worse ace X? Like, is for some reason like ace jack worse than ace king in this spot?
I don't think ace jack is worse than ace king. I think ace jack is worse than ace king. I think that like upon reflection, I don't necessarily think the king high flush draws are going to go crazy on the turn, because they could just be the best hand. Like king queen, king jack, king 10 of clubs and spades doesn't have a ton of incentive to just kind of go crazy on the turn, because they could just be winning right now.
Right.
So I don't like having a jack, because like especially the jack of spades or jack of clubs, because that does block their available flush draws. So like having the jack of spades or the jack of clubs, I think both of those are probably not great cards to have. The reality is here, and I think I'm just going to end my thoughts and opinions on this hand, is that this spot is very unclear to me, and I really don't know what to do facing this big bet on the turn on the 4-liner and then the follow-up river. Like I can sit here and pretend to have, amazing insight and great wisdom in this spot, but like the reality is it's obscure and I just don't know. I'm not ultra studied in this situation. And so, yeah, just this one, maybe this is like the one hand on Tactical Tuesday that I should have that I should have reviewed before we got in here, because like I just feel kind of stuck, because I mean, it's just a very, very bizarre situation where, like, to find natural bluffs, villains need to be floating from out of position with an air ball and then basically donking and jamming. Do villains do that? I don't know. Seeing the amount of pressure that it puts on Ace King, I think that it's pretty cool. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Funny that you say that, because maybe I should have felt more pressure, but in the moment, I can tell you that I was not feeling a ton of pressure, even as bad as this board looks for my hand. I was like, dude, I have top pair, top kicker, flush blocker, and a 3-bet pot.
Well, remember the heuristic, right? When Reg finds something weird, they typically have it.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to find when you have something weird. That's the thing that scares me the most, is like, it takes a creative player with, a lot of heart to find this with like Jack 10 of spades or 8-9 of spades, or just some other hand that just like decides to float the flop to bomb the turn.
And it's really easy to do it when you have a 3. Like, you can just see it super easily.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the turn's going to get checked through a lot, so I'm just going to donk. And
exactly. It's very easy to see when you have a tray or when you have a set or 2 pair.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think, long story short, I don't know what I would have done in game. I would have highly considered folding, though.
I think I considered folding for like half a second, maybe. And then...
Well, when you have like slam dunk value that you can find, and then the bluffs are kind of blurry, I think that's another kind of indicator that villain, that villain can just way more easily find the value and not the bluff so much. All right, so we'll wrap up this hand, go to the break. I don't know what happens. I mean, I assume you call, and then I don't know what villain shows up on the river with, because very bizarre, and they have a flush, so they rivered the flush.
7-9 of clubs.
7-9 of clubs. Yeah,
people can't see the numbers, but they can see it as a flush.
Yeah, good for them. Like, that's a really cool turn lead. I wonder if they jam, if they brick.
No, that's
kind of the operative question, right? But no way to know unless we track them down and ask them.
Yeah, hard to know how bad my call on the river is if we don't know whether they jam brick rivers.
Yeah, but it's good to see 7-9 of clubs, right? Like, it's good that you don't just see like, ace tray.
Hearts, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll get
like,
threes, yeah.
Of course, the obvious one.
Yeah.
All right, so coming up after the break, I have no idea how to segue into it because I don't know what's going to happen in Themeless Tactical Tuesday. So stick around for my surprise. Maybe John can find another hand to just put me in the ringer and trying to figure out what to do.
In a world where a fish donk bets the flop, and you don't know what to do, one man,
Coach Brad Wilson,
has a surefire plan to neutralize flop leads and rip that dunk to shreds. Nuffle. Available now. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/nuffle. Rated R.
All right. Welcome back from the break. Now getting ready to throw down on hand number 2. You got a jack and a 4, so starting out promising in this hand. You want to break down the action for the podcast listener?
Sure. So 4-handed, 1K and L, folds around to the button, folds around to the small blind, who appears to be, I guess, like a tightish reg over 100 hands. He opens to $30, and I 3-bet the Jack 4 of spades to $90. This is just going to be one of the many trashy 3-bet bluffs that I have blind versus blind.
Yeah, you like your big blind 3-bets versus a small blind on the trashy side. Got it.
Oh.
Jack and the 4.
Yeah.
By the way, you made this video, and the time that it takes, a podcast listener can't see this, but the YouTube watcher can. I'm trying to like navigate this. Like, look at the man. Boom. Just boom, boom, boom. Raise 3-bet. As if raise 3-bet call. Like, way to make my life easy, John. Way to make my life easy.
Jack 4 suited. What did you expect?
Calling is, I certainly don't expect folding. Calling is reasonable. And we get a very connected flop. 8, 9, 10, 2 clubs. You have the Jack and the 4. Small blind checks, and looks like you fire out a bet of half pot.
Yep. I mean, I guess without going like too much into sizing, I think blind versus blind, I think I'm gonna have probably a check and a checking range on this board. I think I'm gonna have way more of a checking range in 3-bet pots blind versus blind than I would in any other position, simply because my 3-bet range in the big blind facing a small blind open is going to be really, really wide and have like a lot of really trashy hands like this, and it's going to have like a lot of just like random ace-x that's going to want to check like a decent number of flops. However, I think this board with this exact hand is definitely not going to be one of the checks for me, and I go ahead and c-bet half pot into $180.
Okay. And I think your c-bet strategy here should be fairly selective on boards like this. You know, you should be doing quite a bit of checking in position. But yeah, so you bet, and the villain calls, and we get a king on the turn. So king on the turn doesn't really change that much. It upgrades some like king 10s, king 9s, the 2 pair. King queen, I guess the gut shot on the flop is now upgraded to top pair. Queen jack is still the same. On this king turn, the villain checks.
I also have king jack. I guess that's one big.
It is, but a lot of the upgrades on the turn aren't betting the turn. Right. So I think that like, villain checks and you decide to bet. What is that? It's like 2/3. Tell me about that.
So I think that on this super dynamic board, I don't remember if we read it out for the podcast listener, but the flop is 10, 9, 8, 2 clubs and a heart. The turn is the king of hearts. So now there's 2 flush draws and 3 straight on board. I think I have a really good hand to just start kind of thinking about running a big bluff with the jack blocking some of his super strong hands like jack 7 and queen jack. I don't block either of the flush draws, which I think makes my hands maybe not a great barrel candidate on the turn, but a really good triple barrel candidate if both or maybe the front door flush draw bricks. So yeah, my plan here was just to barrel turn big and probably jam a lot of rivers.
Yeah, I think I just checked back this turn, honestly.
Whoa.
And I checked back with a fairly large portion of my range. Mm-hmm. The king jacks, the king queens, maybe even the 2 pairs, like 8, 10, 8, 9, 9, 10. Those hands, all the single pair type hands, aces is checking back. I think what makes me nervous about going bet jam is that you have a high availability of bluffs. Ace jack, ace queen, and ace jack, and then hearts, clubs. Probably not super visible that you have, jack 5, jack 6, jack 4, probably jack 3 or jack deuce in your range as well. And then on the value side of it, you've got your sets, 8s, 9s, 10s. You have sets of kings. You probably have king 10, and then you have queen jack. But the queen jacks, you're not 3-betting them pure, I imagine, facing
Suited
a small
ones.
blind open. Right. So that's only 4, you
Yeah.
know? So we're looking like 4 combos of queen jack suited, 3 combos of kings, 3 combos of 10s, 3 combos of 9s, 3 combos of 8s, 3, 6, 9, 12, 16, and then 3 combos of king 10. So 19 value combos in your range. And then, you know, if you have every ace queen, well, now your value to bluff ratio is like 1-to-1, and villain can just like pretty safely and easily call. So like I would probably start checking the turn here and go for a stop and go versus villain's river check. And I don't think we need to make a large investment. Probably something like a third or half pot on the river gets the job done with this hand. Allows us to realize our actual equity and realize fold equity as well. So that to me seems like I know that's what I would do in this spot is check back turn and bet river like half pot or a third.
Okay, that's I didn't even think about doing that in game. I just love
You're wrecking
barreling
ball.
too much. Yeah, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
like a hammer and a nail, whatever analogy where I just see nails everywhere.
Yeah, when your main tool is a hammer, everything tends to look like a nail, right?
Yeah.
But you're trying to manage like multiple parts of your range, and I just think that like you've got once you bet the flop, you have a lot of hands in your range that naturally want to play for only one more bet, and villain is probably going to be aware of that, and so that just creates a downstream opportunity to just bet the river.
Gotcha. One thing you didn't mention that I'm sure is almost unthinkable to you, given my hand on the board, is that when we check back the turn, sometimes we get to bluff catch river.
Well, yes.
Hard with a jack and a 4 to see how that's going to happen, but it's about to happen.
Okay. Now I'm excited to see what on God's earth happens on the river. So you river a 4. I guess that's the one thing that can happen here.
It gives us a bluff catcher, yeah.
And it completes the backdoor flush. And is villain going to donk the?
It is not donk.
Okay, they just check.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no bluff catching.
I had what I was saying was that if I had checked back the turn, especially versus villain's hand, which we just revealed, like, you know, you do have that is an option, like a door that opens up when you check back the turn. Is sometimes you have to bluff catch the river.
Yeah. For the podcast listener, the river's a 4 and it goes check, and John beats the A6 of clubs. So villain had combo draw, nut flush draw on the turn. Thank God you didn't turn a pair into a bluff. Like,
okay, so that was my question. That was going to be my question. Was that I arrive on the river? Okay, so I think particularly on dynamic flops, like very, very wet flops like this one, 8, 9, 10, whatever, I get to the river with like I've rivered some really, really bad bottom pair that's not going to beat any value. Certainly not going to beat like any of their bluff catchers. And in a spot where like I was planning on tripling the river, when I like river these small pairs, I asked myself like, is this still a spot where I should be tripling the river? Am I like kind of wussing out by not turning these, like, you know, sort of giving myself an out or an excuse, being like, oh, well, I have a pair now, so like I get to check and like, you know, beat all their draws. So that was like my main question about this hand was, should I be thinking about turning these hands into bluffs, or does like the wetness and the dynamicness of the flop sort of allow me to check this hand back comfortably, knowing that there are a lot of draws that I beat?
Okay, so I'm going to go into this in full coaching mode here and ask you, do you think I believe you have a tendency to over-aggress with pairs on the river or under-aggress? Over-aggress. So if it's a question,
if it's close, it's not actually
if it's close. If it's close, you should just not do it.
Okay.
Like if you don't know, if you don't have confidence, it seems unsure, since your natural tendency is to go for it whenever it's questionable, like just don't go for it.
The problem though is that it's always questionable. I never get to the river with a pair and be like, oh, this is a slam dunk like jam here with my, you know, pair of whatevers.
I mean,
This one is
Yeah,
super questionable. I agree, but this is on the questionable scale. This is pretty high up there. But
Yeah, I mean, you river bottom pair, you happen to win. I don't know exactly if you should be like, I just would check back the turn and not really, and then just kind of play it accordingly. So like, I don't really get in this situation with your hand, I guess, is one part of it. And secondly, like, villain does have hands that you beat, I guess, like ace jack of clubs, ace queen, ace jack of hearts. I don't know. Not many hands that you beat once they call 2 bets on this board. So maybe you should go for it. I don't know. The reality is like, this is another situation that's not exactly clear to me once you river 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th pair. But yeah, the major takeaway for me would just be like, I'm a fan of checking the turn there when we have like a lot of available 1 pair hands that disincentivize villain from probing river.
okay, yeah, I think that's definitely the biggest takeaway for me too. Is that like on these, there's like a lot of available 1 pair hands on like a super dynamic board where we're gonna get called on the turn like pretty light. It's like not inconceivable that like they would call us a little lighter than usual given like the double flush draw and the 3 straight on board.
I'm not ultra concerned about getting called lighter than usual. What I'm most concerned about is having many available bluffs and much less available top end value. Like that's, when you're trying to generate fold equity versus a reg, like when you just don't have much top end value and you have a lot of available bluffs, it's like, okay, they just get to bluff catch way more easily against you. You're never betting aces on this turn. You're never betting ace king. You're never sizing up with ace king or aces or king queen or king jack. So like, yeah, it's just like, oh, cool. So this guy's repping like a straight, top 2 pair sets and then some lower equity draws. So cool. I have like jack 10. Just gonna call.
Probably wouldn't even be betting aces and ace king that often on the flop anyways. Yeah.
Cool. So 2 good hands. two good hands to break down on Tactical Tuesday. Very thought-provoking hands. The first one is going to be on my mind for probably a little while, and just kind of reverse engineering all the things that are kind of going on there, what villain must have been thinking by donkey the turn with the 7-9 of clubs. I think it's a really cool line that they found, and that's something that as you're playing cards for the podcast listener, the YouTube watcher, when somebody does something that's like sort of outside the box and puts you in this weird spot where you're kind of grasping around and don't know exactly what's going on, they did something quite clever and merits further investigation. And with that said, I mean, I think we've talked about all the things that we talk about here on Tactical Tuesday. Anything left to say, John?
See you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.